One of the most shocking and tragic moments of Anakin Skywalker's betrayal was when he lashed out at his wife Padmé on the landing port of Mustafar. Despite her being pregnant and ready to give birth at any moment, Anakin's rage fully consumed him as he gave in to the pressures of the darkness. Whenever Obi-Wan arrived, Lord Vader had believed that the Jedi had fully turned his wife against him. He was enraged that the woman he trusted would bring his best friend to murder him. It was a heartbreaking moment, and the one that Luke Skywalker would be spared of for many, many years. Luke never truly knew the extent of his father's evil until he would watch it when he was much older. He had already known Vader when he was redeemed, and he could sense the darkness that had originated within him. But he also slowly unraveled the truths of the dark deeds whenever he became a Jedi Master. And one of the final depraved actions that Luke beheld was the moment where he watched Anakin kill his own mother inadvertently. Of all of the things that he had known his father was capable of, this would be the most troubling one to grapple with. So what was Luke Skywalker's reaction to seeing this horrific moment on Mustafar? Well, R2-D2 has been kind enough to give us a glance into this moment and the most secret files that we could find. But before we dive in, the droid also informed us of something else. Many who are trying to access the data have not yet subscribed to the archives yet. So if you're interested in discovering more about what Luke thought of the days before his birth, then reach out with the Force and crush that subscribe button so that you can be notified every time we take a deep dive. Now, Acolytes, let's begin. The secret files of R2-D2 were kept in his memory recordings of everything that he witnessed in the entirety of the prequel era. Since he had been there for practically everything, he stored it all away in his memory files. But fearful of having his memory wiped eventually, R2 would squirrel away the traumatizing events in a locked section of his memory bank, so that no one but the most important individuals could ever access it. Ever since knowing Luke, the little astromech had been hesitant to reveal much of what he knew. And to be fair, Luke never actually really asked him to. Luke didn't know that R2 had these memories, but in the latter days of the new Jedi Order, Luke had now fully stepped into his role as the Grand Master. And then, it was discovered that R2 kept recordings pertaining to Luke's mother and father that he had not seen. The droid had been reluctant to show Luke anything pertaining to them, especially the recording of Mustafar. In his own words, he was worried that it would overload Luke's circuits. However, Luke was compelled to look within R2's memory bank because there was a rumor that arose that Mara Jade was the one who had murdered Padmé, and Luke needed to know. By this point, the year was nearing 40 ABY, and R2 had kept these secret recordings buried so deeply that they required a slicer to install a new gate into his circuits that then could access all of the files. When R2 awoke after being updated, he was still reluctant to show Luke the recording, and even wanted to run away. But Luke ended up convincing him to show the raw, uncut footage. And so, with great hesitancy, R2 projected the scene from his memory core, starting at the moment when Anakin ran out to the landing pad to meet Padmé. Luke, Mara Jade, and Jacen Solo were all present during this recording. Jacen was eager to see his grandfather and grandmother for the very first time, but even he wasn't ready to view what the tapes held. As the footage went on, the two of them began to talk. Padmé told him that she had heard terrible things about what he had done, and Anakin simply denied it, insisting that Obi-Wan was attempting to turn her against him. Luke was on the edge, hearing the irrational, the dangerous edge of Anakin's voice, but he told R2 that he was fine. And he continued to watch. While he understood why R2 had kept these things from him, Jacen believed that pain was only dangerous when it was feared. This had been one of the lessons taught to him by Vader. In Jacen's opinion, Luke needed to see the end of the Hollow and embrace that pain. Jacen at this point had already undergone his training with Vader during the time when he was captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, and under her instructions, he was taught how to be effective, efficient, that pain was not to be feared, but confronted, and then overcame. That was the only way to ensure things would stay done, or to finish them yourself. Needless to say, while he was far from the days of Darth Kaitis, Jacen was already taking steps in that direction. As they continued watching though, Padmé declared that all she wanted was Anakin's love, but the fallen chosen one declared that love would not save her, only his new power. Anakin said that he refused to lose her the way that he had lost his mother. As Luke watched on, he felt that Anakin's face now belonged to someone else, someone angry, frightened, and selfish. When Padmé pleaded with him to come with her, to leave everything behind, Anakin simply responded that they don't have to run. He's more powerful than the Chancellor, that he can overthrow him, that they can rule the galaxy, make things the way that they want them to be. This is what the novel reads about Luke's reaction to all of this. Luke sighed audibly, clearly dismayed at the arrogance that had led his father down the dark path of an oppressor. But Jacen found himself responding to his grandfather far more sympathetically, almost with an admiration. Anakin Skywalker had understood his own strength, and at one point in time at least, he had tried to use that strength to bring about peace. Vergere would have approved of this. Power unused was power wasted, and whatever had happened to him later, Anakin Skywalker had at least attempted to use his for a good end. This is fascinating. Luke and Jacen are getting two entirely different impacts from this video of Anakin. While Jacen found himself admiring Anakin's reasoning and drive to make real change, Luke was exacerbated at his father's pride and his blindness. He would remember when Darth Vader had tried to recruit him on Cloud City, promising that they would rule the galaxy as father and son. It all made sense now. Vader had been just as blind then as he was on Mustafar. He didn't understand that people with real love didn't need or want that power. It was a concept that he couldn't understand until the very end of his life. It was a tragedy. But as you continue to watch, the scene grew drastic. Padmé, now heartbroken, saw what had become of her husband. She didn't know him anymore. He was going down a path that she could not follow. Anakin was darker in appearance now, accusing Obi-Wan of having poisoned her mind. In one more desperate plea, Padmé only asks him to return with her while he still could. But Skywalker knows it is too late. Somewhere off screen though, Obi-Wan had now entered. Anakin's mind was eclipsed with rage at the sight of the Jedi Master. The loving husband, the hero of the Jedi Order and the Clone War, was gone. The soon-to-be father was pushed back behind the mask of the tyrant Lord Vader. He shouted and accused that his wife had betrayed him, that she brought Obi-Wan there to murder him. And with that, he force-choked his own wife through the Force. This is what the book reads as Luke sees this happen. Luke cried out in disbelief, and the Force grew heavy with grief and outrage. Even Jacen, whose time among the Yuzhong Vong had taught him to never be surprised by the brutality of one being and what they could inflict on another. Even Jacen felt his stomach turn at the sight of his grandfather using the Force to choke the woman he supposedly loved. Luke's very presence in the Force changes as he watches one of the darkest deeds of the Dark Lord Vader. As Anakin drops Padmé out of frame and he begins to shout at Kenobi, the recording reaches an abrupt conclusion. This entire process of digging up such old data has shot some of R2-D2's circuits, and he was forced to stop the playback. But this was all enough for Luke. As the hologram dissolved into a static, everyone was silent. The book then reads this. Luke was stiff and ashen, fighting back tears. Mara was staring at the spot where Padmé's limp form had vanished from the holo. Jacen was trying to decide where his grandfather had gone wrong, trying to puzzle out what flaw had made him a slave to his temper. Even R2-D2 remained silent, continuing to project a column of hollow static onto the floor. Tears were escaping down Luke's cheeks now, and Jacen could sense him struggling with the anger he felt towards his father. It left a fiery, bitter taste in the Force, all the more powerful because of the forgiveness that Luke had already granted Anakin, but he was still angry. For the first time in a while, Luke feels so powerful in his emotion towards his father that it makes it worse, as this is after Luke finds out about Anakin murdering the younglings. R2 had hidden other data that he had shown him sometime prior. During that, Luke had struggled with his feelings, but was able to compartmentalize. In order to cope, he reminded himself that Anakin and Vader were two entirely separate people. In his mind, the actions of Vader could not and should not be counted as the sins of Anakin. But this time was different. He had watched in real time. He had seen one transform, shift into the other before his very eyes. Luke was so overcome with this that he refused to call Anakin by his name from that recording. He insisted that it had been Darth Vader that had harmed his mother. Only Vader. Immediately after viewing everything, Luke had to take a long moment to calm down before becoming irritable. R2 did have the recordings of when Padmé breathed her final breath, but Luke denied watching it. He didn't need to. He knew that Mara did not kill her. Jacen, however, knew that he was running from the footage, because he knew that he didn't want to face the pain. Jacen wanted Luke to see that moment. He wanted Luke to confront this moment, to watch his mother die. He attempted to argue for Luke to watch it, believing that it was necessary for him to overcome the obstacle, to truly overcome the darkness. But Luke actually snaps at Jacen, telling him that he does not think he needs to see anything more. And from here, the conversation shifts to the crisis that they have at hand. Luke had not been able to know his parents, even though he did have a loving family on Tatooine. Although it was a rough journey, he got to know his father through Anakin's Force Ghost, as well as anecdotes by Obi-Wan, and scraps of information left behind in journals, old holo recordings. But as for Padmé, Luke knew next to nothing. He had seen some images of her before this recording, but this is one of the only times he ever saw footage of her. And of course, it happened to be the worst moment of her entire life, when Vader came out and committed an act that would lead to Padmé losing the will to even live. Despite having many decades of experience at this point, and being a near master of his emotions, Luke felt such anguish and distress that it changed the entire air of the Force around him. But with this, we also find Jacen's reaction fascinating, and the clear steps towards his eventual transformation into Darth Kaitis are becoming more and more clear. As many of you are aware, Leia never actually saw this recording, and it's a good thing she didn't. It took a much longer time for Leia to forgive Anakin for his actions as Vader. We only ever get to see snippets of how Luke finds out about the events of the Clone Wars though, and the deep past associated with his parents and the Jedi. But each and every time it's compelling and exciting, especially hearing his thoughts after the fact, when he has some time to study the ways of the Jedi and become more familiar with the Force. His reactions with confronting what Anakin really was is fascinating. But anyway, if you want us to find more moments like this one, reporting them back to you, then be sure to let us know. And if you're curious on the source for today's video, this story comes to us in the final entry in the Dark Nest trilogy, in the book called Swarm War, just in case you want to read it yourself. But until next time, Acolytes, thank you so much for watching the channel, and as always, may the Force be with you.